thought there was a lot of really good, strong performances throughout. And the debate on a whole, I thought was quite good, quite substantive, quite compelling, pretty sharp. The one thing that keeps happening, and I'm curious to hear what you guys all think, is everyone keeps waiting for the knives to come out. I mean, this primary, I have to say, as someone who covered particularly 2008 and then covered the 2016 primary on the Republican side, this primary has not been particularly vicious. I mean, these folks have not really been going after each other. There are jabs here and there. There was lots of expectations tonight because of Biden's performance in Iowa that he would have to go after various candidates, and Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders particularly. And he did. There were a few moments where he went after them. But this is nothing like the bloody brawl that I have seen in other primaries. I mean, obviously, nothing will ever compare to 2016 Republican primary. No one's talking about the size of their genitalia, for instance, thank God. Thank God. But it is true that it just hasn't really gotten particularly cutting. And I think there's two reasons for that. The one big reason is that there is a huge multi-candidate field. And everyone, I think, rightly thinks that they will hurt their own chances if they're seen as going negative, right? They also sense that there is just this intense anxiety, this pit in the stomach of Democratic voters about unity, this worry that the party is going to fracture, this worry that people aren't going to unify behind the nominee in order to defeat Trump. And because of that, no one wants to go particularly hard at someone else because they don't want to send the signal to you guys who are all shaking your heads vigorously at me when I describe that knot in the pit of your stomach. They are worried they're going to alienate you. They're worried that they're going to increase the anxiety of Democratic voters that they need, right? The problem so far, and I'm not saying people should get nastier with each other, but it ends up being like watching a tennis match and then selecting that person to go play football. It is very, very hard to conceive of the universe that the person who wins this nomination is going to walk into, because the universe that we've seen in these debates, which is a normal, sensible, substantive universe in which people have exchanges based on facts and differences about policy outcomes, is not the universe of the maelstrom of insanity and deceit that they're about to walk into. And yet everybody wants to know, well, who's the person that can go beat Trump? Who's the person that can stand toe-to-toe with him? Who's the person who can mobilize people against Trump? But the problem is it's very hard to sell yourself as that person in the context of a Democratic Party debate. So you get this kind of paradox in all these debates. You come out being like, oh, that person seems smart. That person has made a good point there. That person sort of landed a blow there. But then looming in the background is this enormous, once in a generation, hopefully once in a ever monster, cartoon monster that is going to have to be fought by the nominee. And I think that ends up, and I want to sort of check in with people here about how you felt about watching it. Even people being impressed, I want to get at what is going on in the gut of the Democratic primary voter. That fear, that anxiety, that question about who can take on Trump and how they're going to actually resolve that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.